You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for our Roundtable number 41. We are being joined today by Mr. Jon Gettman. And as we are getting all set here, one moment, as we're having some brief technical. And let's see, share to a page. And we're good to go. So we're having a series of discussions with leaders and those that have been in our movement that have inspired us through the years, and we're very, very honored to be joined by Professor Jon Gettman, and he's joining us today from Virginia. I'd like to thank our Veterans Action Council members for joining us tonight. Michael Green, Wade Laughter, Al Byrne, Todd Scatini, Michael Crowitz, Pearson Kennedy Crosby, Mary Lynn Mathry, Nate Landau, George Armstrong, and Tony Landry. Myself, I am Etienne Fontan. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very special discussion with one of the policy makers, I believe, who has done his best to instigate change. When I started off as a neophyte activist back when I was in my early 20s, post-war veteran, just trying to figure my way out, it was gentlemen like Jon Gettman and what he was doing, and Al and others that were doing things on the national stage that we would read about and would inspire us to carry and take our torches and ignite them in the flame of their presence, and then actually take that light forward into the darkness and bring about some change. So these are a series of talks with those that inspire us, and Jon is definitely one of those. So basically going to start off with thank you once again, Jon, for joining us in our group this evening. What got you into cannabis in the first place? What inspired you? What was your first sort of dabble in cannabis, your first memory that made you go, this is inspirational?
Well, it was a lot of nice people like you folks, and I don't mean that to be patronizing. Look, there's two little stories I want to tell you here. One is the first time I smoked weed. And I'm a teenager. I'm a freshman in high school. My family has moved to a new area. I don't know anybody. I'm trying to make friends and find fun things to do. And I spent an evening at a coffee house at a church. And basically, I went out with some people to get high. And the first time, I didn't get high. I didn't notice anything. But the second time that night, I did. And I said, this is really cool. I like this. It made me feel good. But it was also nice to get fellowship, to meet and interact with people. And that's always been one of the really great things about cannabis in my life, is the community that has grown up around it, around the interaction of people using cannabis and so forth. So that got me into cannabis in general. And a series of events got me working at a counterculture hotline in Washington, D.C. called D.C. Switchboard. It was on the top floor of a building at 1724 20th Street. And the guy who was sort of running that counterculture hotline had a retail store. It was a head shop. And over time, I got to know him, and he gave me a job. And I started working in the paraphernalia industry. And the second anecdote that I want to share here is how I actually got into the cannabis legalization movement. And there, I think the person I'd like to credit is George Farnham, who was one of Keith Stroop's proteges at Normal. And eventually, George was the director of Normal for several years. And George, we knew George through the store. But more importantly, in 1980, George put an initiative on the DC ballot to legalize cannabis in Washington, DC. Now, I don't think many of you know about this, remember this, because it didn't pass. But I was the manager of the best head shop in town. We got signatures for that initiative in the store, and I went out canvassing with George. We would go to movies. In those days, it was, if you wanted to see the new Star Wars movie, you had to get in line. And the line was 4 blocks down from the movie theater. And that was a great place to get signatures. You guys have all done this. We all have done this. You Californians have been doing this for centuries, or so it seems. So we hit the line and we get signatures. And I got to know George very well during that time. We also got to know Keith Stroop, especially after the Peter Bourne affair, and Keith got in some trouble. And we kind of reached out to Keith with a little humorous matter of support. And the guy I worked for, we got to know Keith, we got to know George, we got a relationship with Normal. I worked on the it was The Empire Strikes Back, by the way. It was that Star Wars movie. But I just got involved in the initiative process with George. And at some point, I mean, I did the paraphernalia thing, the business for 8 years. And we spent a lot of time talking about how clever we were not to be in the illegal side of things, to be kind of straddling the illegal market, but we were all legal. At some point, I thought, you know what, this is all nice, but maybe I ought to do something to get rid of these stupid laws that are sending people to jail. So as my time in that business ran its course, and I left the company and went to get my my first degree, I started working part-time at Normal, and they gave me opportunities to apply the small business experience I had with the prior business. And so I got more involved in Normal, and here we are today. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things between then and now. But it was working in a head shop and realizing that it was nice to make money, but that there was a social justice issue in play here. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but that sort of got me into social justice and activism. And that's been a theme pretty much the rest of my life in terms of what I do with myself.
I always find it very fascinating what has inspired and what drives. And yeah, you encapsulated that quite succinctly, what many of us feel and drive forward with. So that was a great breakdown. First up will be Council Member Wade Laughter.
Yeah, thank you, Etienne, and thank you, Dr. Gettman, for joining us today. One of the things I heard about your history is that you were involved in a long-term lawsuit against the federal government that eventually made it all the way to the Supreme Court, which is quite a journey. Would you please explain that journey and how did you get started on that and find the perseverance to carry it all that way? Thank you.
Okay. Well, a couple of things here. Let's be clear, credit where credit is due. There have been 3 legal actions to try to take marijuana out of the Controlled Substances Act. And I was a direct catalyst for 2 of those. And Al and Michael and other people were very much involved in that second effort. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in due course. I think what you're referring to is actually the first rescheduling action that Normal commenced in, I believe, 1972. And this was in the courts, in the federal courts, until 1994. Now, it didn't go to the Supreme Court, but it went to the U.S. Court of Appeals. In fact, when I was working on the first rescheduling petition that I launched, I had to dig into the legal history of this prior 22-year action. And it produced 3 different important legal decisions from the U.S. Court of Appeals that clarified the laws about the scheduling process. Now, when I went through this process myself 2 times, it was in part, can we do this? Can we make it work? And it was also, if this doesn't work, let's establish that and move on to other areas. But this first 22-year saga that Normal got into, when I was working at Normal and when I became president of Normal, this 22-year battle had gotten to its crescendo, to its final arena, which were hearings before Judge Francis Young. And Judge Young was an administrative law judge. And let me just quickly give you an idea of what it took to get there. The Controlled Substances Act says, hey, you think a drug's in the wrong place? Give us the science, we'll go through a process and maybe we'll move it. So Normal did that in the 1970s. And the federal government said, whoa, wait a minute, we have no interest in this whatsoever. And at first they said, well, we signed this treaty and therefore our hands are tied, we can't do anything. So there's a long court case about that and whether or not the treaty forbids anything from happening. And there were a couple of these issues where they just said, we don't want to do it for this reason. And it had to go all the way into the federal courts for the courts to say, no, shut up and do your job. And all this kind of settled the case law about rescheduling, which made it the 2 ventures I launched, well, they only took about 8 years apiece as opposed to 22. So that is progress, I suppose. But really through rescheduling, we've learned that the Controlled Substances Act is not where cannabis needs to be. And there's been a lot of talk, people want to deschedule cannabis. I'm kind of worn out from having, been doing this for a long time, but I've basically been coming around to know we actually do need to have an advocacy push to further nudge Congress along to get that done. I mean, maybe it's a technical thing that needs to be done because they're going to write new laws about cannabis. But getting it out of the Controlled Substances Act has been an issue since 1972, which math tells me was 50 years ago. And Normal launched this long battle, and I came in at the end of that battle. Now, for me, I learned about the rules about rescheduling. I learned about the science. I learned about what all the obstacles were. And when I had run my course at Normal the first time around, I've worked for Normal twice. I worked for a while, I left, I went back, I left again. Well, I started doing some research for, I was going to write a book. And it turns out every time I decide to write a book in my life, I come up with some other new social justice project, and I just end up doing that, not writing the book. And in this case, it became the rescheduling petition that I filed. But I was doing some research, and I know exactly when and where this happened. I walked into the government printing office bookstore on H Street in Northwest DC. I saw a title on the shelf. It said the biological basis for substance abuse. And I thought this will be a hoot, given what usually comes out of the government. I bought this little brochure. It's a 60-page little booklet. Took it home. I admit, got stoned, started reading it. And then these giant light bulbs started going off because this thing explained to me that the endocannabinoid system had been discovered, and that we now know how marijuana or cannabis, I'm still getting that in my head, how cannabis produces its characteristic effects. And that in terms of dependence, it didn't act the way other drugs did. Literally, they could not get rats to self-administer cannabis. Now, that was a big deal. Self-administering cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, that's one of the ways that they say, okay, look, see how addictive it is. But they couldn't get them to do it with cannabis. So having done the tail end of this 22-year-old battle, I knew that had evidentiary value in these proceedings. And so that's when I started the second rescheduling effort, and then that became the third, and so on. But yeah, that saga, this sort of got me into this very arcane area of what the law is, what the court decisions are, and just how the government gets away with not treating cannabis the way it ought to in the legal regulations. So it's a really wonky thing, but I think it's an important thing. It certainly was a good learning experience for me to dive into. And honestly, on a personal level, when I filed what's now I'm calling the second rescheduling petition, my first rescheduling petition, I felt that was really the best thing I'd ever done in my life. I mean, I was very, very proud of that work, and I'm sorry that it didn't get the results that we wanted to, but engaging with the science at that level and understanding the impact that it had on people's lives, it really sort of just it strengthened that attachment I have to doing this type of work, and I realized that this was something that that I had some skill at, and it would be good for me to continue.
Thank you, Dr. Gettman.
Thank you very much. Michael Crowitz has the next question, but he actually has a follow-up before he leads into that question. So, Councilmember Crowitz.
Thank you, Etienne. It's great to see you, John. My follow-up is just around, it's one of the more fascinating things for me, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about it from your perspective, today, is what I would call Bob Randall's compromise. It seems that working with Bob Randall back in the day, at that pinnacle of that case you're talking about with Judge Young, but Bob was willing, representing cannabis consumers and medical patients, to compromise with the DEA and accept Schedule 2. And with Schedule 2 came the same level of abuse potential as Schedule 1, so it wasn't even a consideration. So he went ahead and signed off, so to speak, on the high potential for abuse in good faith that they were going to then do their part and reschedule. And of course, the rest is history. As I remember, the DEA was allowed to overrule Judge Young based on a save the children argument or something along those lines. That, in other words, the DEA could consider other factors besides the science and the law when considering whether to listen to its administrative judge, and that it had its own power to overrule its own administrative law judge. But I'd love to talk a little bit about that and what it's meant over the years to kind of be saddled with that compromise, even when the DEA wasn't acting in good faith.
Sure. First of all, let me give you a little history here as to how we got that hearing before the administrative law judge. That's not an automatic in the it's called a rulemaking process, and it's not automatic that you get a hearing before an administrative law judge. Now, I referenced several different court decisions, and there were two that are published decisions, easily found in all the law books. There's a third one that's an unpublished opinion. It's called a slip opinion. And basically, there'd been two federal court orders to process the normal's petition and just process it and move on. And they wouldn't do it. They kept coming up with reasons not to do it. So the federal courts, in response to normal's a filing Normal made, the federal courts effectively put this whole process in receivership. They said, look, you guys, we're tired of this. Get your act together, and you got to report to us like every month as to what your progress is. And we're tired of you guys screwing around. Well, what that meant was the whole procedure now was under the supervision of a federal judge. Well, the federal government wanted to carve out Marinol. They wanted to carve out dronabinol, reschedule it, and make the THC pill available as a medical therapy. And they couldn't do it without Normal's agreement. And so here's the deal. Normal agreed to let them carve out Marinol and make that available to people as a THC pill in exchange for getting the hearings before Judge Francis Young. So that's one little thing about, the negotiations and the power games and whatnot. Now, as far as the DEA just not wanting to do any of this, the formal reason is, if they have a rational, reasonable explanation, the courts will let them do what they want to do. And as much as many of the factors that you raised, Michael, were part of it, the bottom line is the feds kept insisting it was a rigged game. And Michael, it was a rigged game. You heard this at the hearing we had with the federal courts. And by the way, one of the reasons we got our hearing on the merits of the final rescheduling petition I did is because Michael Crowitz was recognized by the courts as having standing to bring this issue. It was Michael's involvement specifically, by way of Patients at a Time, but it was Michael specifically. They said, dude, you got a real issue here. We will hear your case. But the reason they get away with it is they say, look, we don't have scientific studies. We do not have double-blind clinical trials that show marijuana is safe and effective. Now, it's a rigged game because they wouldn't provide approval for any approved studies. And there was a point when we were before in our hearing over the last petition, Michael, you may remember this point. The judges started asking about this rigged game, and we had not really raised that sufficiently, I think, in our briefs. I mean, we had good lawyers, they raised good points, but it was fascinating that the court kind of realized that that was one of the problems. But that's the problem. I mean, look, I'm a professor. I teach research methods. I understand clinical trials, and when they say, look, you know, we want to have science behind this, it's kind of hard to argue with them unless you know the history of this entire issue. But again, it doesn't belong in the schedules. The Democrats in Congress know this, and they're getting ready to move it out. It's just a matter of when they're going to get around to it. And I will reveal something that's just breaking in the last month or so. NIDA now acknowledges that we have to get patient accounts, we have to talk to patients, and we have to take their testimonials as having scientific value. NIDA has finally made a complete 180-degree turn on the reliability and validity of patient accounts of their medical cannabis use. That's, I think, a very, very huge change in the federal government's disposition toward medical cannabis in general. But yeah, no, they basically said, we're not going to do it. And they kept coming up with reasons not to. And the courts kind of got rid of a lot of those reasons. But that final one of, hey, we want to have it based on science, that's how they've gotten away with it until now. At the moment, though, I think the modern political context is that scheduling is it's an anachronism. It's a failed 20th century policy that has absolutely no bearing on a 21st century issue.
Boy, oh boy, you know, when they when they say behind the scenes story is interesting, it's an understatement for this. This is a huge, everything's behind it. It's just a little tip of the mountain that's sticking up. Everything is behind the scenes. But the next question I was going to ask you, what we had written down was you authored various pamphlets on cannabis when you were director of NORML in the 80s and 90s. On cannabis. Can you tell us the reasoning behind those? I just want to add to that just slightly by saying that I've been very impressed. I mean, the documentation that you produced over the years has moved the ball, you know, and just handing out flyers and info tables is one thing. Creating documentation that gets I remember the one legislator in Virginia getting in your face, like really getting in your face and arguing with you over the numbers. And you were just reporting the facts. They hurt, you know, the truth hurts sometimes. But I just wanted a little bit of insight into that, more than just, you know, the pamphlets and, you know, kind of what your reasoning was, but, you know, kind of a little bit behind the scenes, if you don't mind, of how you were able to sort of move the ball down the field with documentation.
Sure. Oh, by the way, that legislator, I basically went and kissed his ass because that's what you do with people like that. I later on sent him a nice little apology, and I explained myself, and he said, oh, okay, I get it, and you're welcome to come testify anytime you want, and everything's great. Okay, look, it's the 1980s, and NORML is broke. And I'm trying to find ways to get information out to people, and we didn't have the internet. We had printing presses. I mean, not in the office. So I came up with these pamphlets, and I still have some. It's interesting. A gal named Emily Dufton recently wrote a nice book about the marijuana movement in the 1980s, and She actually, I sent some of these pamphlets to her, and she wrote about a couple of them in her book. And it's nice to get some attention to this old work. But basically, what I did is I took, it's 4 panels, and it's a format that makes you really concentrate on important things and arrange information that's useful. So I had one on marijuana in the human body. I had one on marijuana in human behavior, one on drugs in children. It's called the Common Sense series. And so I have one called Marijuana and Common Sense. The green screen doesn't quite let me show you everything clearly. But no, these were little arguments. And so we print up 10, 20,000 of them, and I'd give them out to volunteers to pass out. I basically threw 10,000 in the trunk of my car, got a buddy of mine, and we drove through the state of Virginia. We'd stop in a city, we'd find a parking lot or a traffic jam. We'd just start passing paper out. I don't know if we ever got a response rate that would justify the expense. But as far as an argument, as far as circulating an argument to people, I think that was very successful. And it allowed us to make arguments that were factually based, that were specific toward issues that the public was talking about: drugs in children, marijuana and behavior, and so forth. And it gave us a way of educating our activists and helping them organize, and it gave them tools to use. So it really was, as I become a professor and I teach research methods and I teach ethnography, there's a thing called bricolage. Reminds me of the Ricola commercial. But basically, if you're an anthropologist or an ethnographer, you make use of whatever you got. It's like you MacGyver stuff all over the place. And that's what I was doing. I simply had a problem. I needed to get information out, and I needed to find a cost-effective way of doing it. And pamphlets were the way to go. And then working within that small medium, that really forced me to get very clear about arguments, about facts, about organizing the issue. So it was a really nice way to train folks my own thoughts about it. It was a really nice way to package information. It was a really nice way to sort of teach our activists how to deal with presenting information in a very digested, concentrated form. So it was a nice project, and it's nice to look back at something you did a while ago and not go like, oh my God, that's horrible. I actually kind of like what's still there. So I'm kind of proud of that, and I'm happy someone remembers it, and I'm happy to talk about it with you guys.
Not only do we remember it, it inspires us, and it's part of the reality that, we currently have our own trifold that we're taking to DC next week, because your trifold inspired a lot of us in Cannabis Action Network when we were out doing the grassroots stuff in 93 and 94. That's what we did, was to get these trifolds into people's hands. And because we were doing them rock and roll concerts, we were hoping that these kids would forget about it in their pants pocket. And this was literally our idea, was that they would forget about it, and then their mom or their father would pull it out of their laundry and be like, hey, what is this? And it would inspire, cause a confrontation to inspire a discussion. So your trifold continued to inspire us until, I guess, really that kind of fell apart with the interwebs. But I mean, a series of trifolds, from using, the Jack Herrera's Emperor Wears No Clothes, and, the histories and the information from Normal, etc., were key components in the darkest days of the drug war for us to drop seeds of information. We even had it called a Planting Seeds Tour for the Cannabis Action Network, and that was our inspiration, using little bits of knowledge sprinkled throughout the 47 states. We did rallies, teach-ins, and tours. We've seen what was able to happen when people realized they didn't have to give up their freedoms. And we thank people like you for inspiring us to give us little hinders, little points that turned out to be integral tools in our toolbox to influence change. So I just have to say thank you for that personally. And
well, thank you. And let me just throw out, synchronicity is an amazing thing. So you guys mentioned the pamphlets. I just said, I should dig these things up. So I went to my closet and I found them, and I found the pamphlets. And I told you, we were chatting before the broadcast, I also found some photographs. And I found a big stack of photographs of a demonstration Ben Maisel had annually in Madison. But Etienne, what I also found were color photographs from a little tour I made in Illinois, where we had set up like 5 demonstrations in different parts of Illinois. So we had a little bit of a road show. And one of those demonstrations, I believe it was at Southern Illinois University, a young woman was participating, and she really was excited and she was really inspired by all of this. And that was Debbie Goldsboro. And then she went on to form the Cannabis Action Network, which you've just mentioned. And I just find it very, very interesting that I find photographs from that little tour. And by the way, that was the last thing I did at Normal in my first tour of duty, so to speak. And it's just funny you raise that when I just come across photos from that particular trip. And yeah, it just amazes me, and it's so gratifying that something I did and then other people pick up and do other things. It's a chain reaction we all get from all of our activities, and my actions are part of a chain reaction of other things other people have done. Oh, by the way, rest in peace, respect to John Zwirling, who was a major supporter of Normal and one of the great criminal defense lawyers in Virginia and in this movement. But as I was telling you earlier about when I worked at the head shop and I was working at this counterculture hotline, 2 doors down the street in the basement of another building was the military drug law panel, which was counseling people who were dealing with veterans and issues with the military, with the war and the draft issues. And John Kenneth Zwirling was working on that project just up the street from when I was working in the head shop. We didn't meet, we didn't interact, but I always knew about that other project. And it was amazing when I met John and realized that our paths were so close in those early years of mine.
Yeah, you inspired Debbie Goldsberry out of Carbondale, Illinois, to get active, and she was a Jack disciple, and she came with Jack to West Virginia University in 1989, and that's when I got my copy of The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and then I went off to serve in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then when I came back, found myself a cannabis patient, and now that book was beyond gold to me. It was a lifestyle, and then to then find her when I moved out to California, I was a direct working with her. So, I'm a direct offshoot of your tree of knowledge. So I cannot thank you enough for the inspiration and the time that you did, because if she hadn't been there and Dr. Todd McCarea hadn't been there and Jack, who knows, but I can't tell you how much it inspires me.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Camelford Lifestyle Shop, open Monday to Friday from 10 till 7 p.m. or by chance. Check out our flags, our t-shirts, plus our hats, and look of that supply of rolling papers, plus much more. We've got bongs and your favorite herbal vaporizers. Look at all the incense we have, as well as for those who collect knives, check out these knives in our collection. And while you're here, stop in to see Shay at the piercing room, where you can get poked by Shay. Daily deals, check them out. Camelford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Camelford, Ontario. Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop, Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Rerolled Saturdays. Check it out. Nothing but non-stop cannabis and psychedelic programming. Find it at 420pace.ca. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
But of course, not only do you inspire us, we happen to work alongside another member of ours who inspires us and that you have worked alongside, and that is Councilmember Al Byrne. And so he is up with our next question. Councilmember Byrne, you're up.
Dr. John!
Dude!
Hey, it's good to see you, John. It's been
Always.
a long time. All right, guys. All right, thank you. Hey, is that, you still in Loudoun County?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Well, I've been in that backyard smoking pot with you then.
Lost a couple of trees, but nope. Still playing the hermit, tucked away in Loudoun County.
Well, listen, my best to Justine, all right? Please remember me to her.
Indeed.
I
will.
You're looking good, by the way. I can tell you've lost some weight, and that makes me happy.
Me too.
You've turned into a handsome old gentleman, John. Good for you.
Thank you, Al.
Listen, I before I ask the question I'm supposed to ask, and I'm not sure I even know what the hell it is anymore, but an anecdote. John tells anecdotes. That's my thing, too. The first medical cannabis conference held in the United States of America was actually held by Normal. And the guy that commissioned that conference was Jon Gettman. And he got Marilyn and I to go to Miami, and we got help by Dr. Melanie Dreyer, who was the dean of the nursing school down there at University of Miami. And we had this totally unsuccessful medical cannabis conference, but damn, we did it. And John was the guy that said, let's try this shit out and see what happens. So I want that part of history remembered. Miami was I had a good time. Hey, what the hell. And before I ask my question, that's really cool that NIDA has finally understood that the testimony of a given patient, which the medical community would call an N of one, study of one, if you will, in its composite form, like hundreds of thousands of N of ones, actually has validity. Took him a while. All right, John, I got to go. You and I in the back years and years and all that stuff. We were involved in all kinds of little legal things and everything. What I want, I brought up the fact that while we were involved in one of these lawsuits which you've described, the DEA, you submitted tens of thousands of pages of documents to them as science, and this is a reason we're saying these things. And I can recall, I'm not the detail on this, that's why I'm asking you, but I can remember the DEA coming back and saying, hey, wait a minute, guys. Some of this stuff's in German or French. Some of this stuff's in this magazine called Nature. How the hell do we find out this stuff? And we couldn't believe that the DEA, with like 25,000 agents, didn't have somebody that could translate French. I'm not making this up. Am I? Tell these guys the background on this stuff.
Well, again, they didn't want to do it. I mean, you got federal bureaucrats. But by the way, I love bureaucrats, okay, and my parents are civil servants. I don't. I'm not one of the let's trash the bureaucrats all the time. But you got bureaucrats; they don't want to do it. They make up excuses. And it's hard to hold them accountable. I'm dying to meet somebody. The petitions, I think we actually kept 2 or 3 bureaucrats employed for 10 years. And I'm really fascinated that I'm hoping someday I meet somebody and they go, oh yeah, I worked on your stuff for 5 years. Thanks for keep giving me a paycheck all the time. But look, before I talk a little bit more about that, Al, I just want to salute you. I look, folks, I am going to turn 65 tomorrow. All right. I'm going to officially be a senior citizen. Thank you. And, you look back at your life, and as I've been looking back at my involvement in this movement, there are a few people that got it, what I was trying to do, and gave me respect and support and cooperation. And Al, you're one of the ones who did that. You were always one of those people that were always right there and got it and knew what I was up to. And I always appreciated that, and I still do. So I just want to commend you and thank you for that. As far as government scientists go, I believe in the professionalism of civil servants, and I was taught a long time ago that the way to get things done is to hold people to their principles. And that's what Patients at a Time was all about. That's what I think was so great about what you and Mary Lynn did with that, is that you kept reminding them about the science. You kept throwing the science back at them. I mean, you're presenting it to, doctors and healthcare professionals, but the fact that the National Clinical Conference kept reminding people that the science is there and you can't avoid it. You have to confront it. And having done that for 25 years is one reason why now they're saying, I'm talking about, they're putting out proposals. They want people to file requests for proposals, okay, RFAs, government grants. We want things, people to get stuff done. And now they're starting to say about patient anecdotes. Well, we'd like to have clinical trials, but we got to talk to all these patients, and maybe what we learn from them will help us form better clinical trials. But right now, we have to get on top of cannabis use because people are using it in the dispensary system, in the so-called legal recreational system, or completely outside the system. And they actually want to get on top of the science. Here's a peculiar thing. We all love pets, and there's nothing peculiar about that. The veterinarians are starting to get on top of cannabis medicine because people are giving cannabinoids to their pets. And the veterinarians are publishing papers saying, look, we got to get on top of this so they know what the safety constraints are. They need to know what the dosing levels are. And they point out that unlike with humans, we have lots of research on cannabis with pets because that's what they've been doing the research on all this time. So, excuse me. So the veterinarians are playing catch up. They're like, people are doing this, whether we like it or not, we got to learn about it, and we have to provide them with servants education and guidance. Well, that's what NIDA is doing. Like, even the veterinarians are getting on board with this trend. NIDA is doing the same thing because they are professionals, they are scientists, they are healthcare professionals. They do care about people. They get distracted by these political operations. But actually, the system does work. It just takes a long effing time to make it work. But we are getting them to really look at the science and the science and the reality of actual patient experience is compelling, and it is extremely powerful, and it just cannot be denied. And so, yeah, we're seeing that. We're seeing the results of the work now that you put in and that Mary Lynn put in, that everyone in this forum has put in over time, and in this movement over time. We're actually making progress, and it's very, very fulfilling. And I'm really proud of the work I've done, but I'm even more proud of the work that you all have done and everyone else has done, and how all this fits together. I just think it's marvelous and very exciting.
Go Team Sisyphus.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Well, I mean, we watched you. We watched you push that stone, and it took all hands to get it over. And I think we're kind of all watching as it's rolling, going, "Wow, that's a pretty fast rolling stone about now." But yeah, here we still are watching it roll. But nor here nor there. It's a process, as we know, and we're going to participate in that process, and that's what we're trying to inspire with that process, with our letter to the U.S. Attorney General over the work Michael and others have done at the United Nations level, changing the Single Convention Treaty. So, and we're going to work with Michael for the next 10 years so that we can get recreational as well. So, yeah, it's a long arc, but we're ready and prepared, and your inspiration amongst others. People all revel in the successes, but people forget on how we used to celebrate our failures, because that's all we had. Successes were few and far between. Up with our next question will be Council Member George Armstrong.
All right, you guys got me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
All right. All right. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Gettman. I think this is great to educate us on the ones that came before us. We understand you're working with the University of Shenandoah on cannabis currently. Could you fill us in on that and any other current stuff that you're doing with anything to do with cannabis?
Love to. Well, it's Shenandoah University, not the University of Shenandoah, but yeah, that's where I work. I made a decision. Actually, what happened was I did the petition, and I realized that the kind of work I was doing was what PhDs do. And I thought, you know what? Since this thing's going to take 10, 20 years, I should go get a PhD while this is working its way through the system. So that's what I went off and did. And I was basically thinking that, you know what? I need a different vehicle to do the kind of things I want to do with this issue. And I figured a university was the vehicle I needed behind me to have the impacts I wanted to have. So I found a job, and then I found a local university that was gave me a job. And I've been teaching criminal justice courses for them for about over 10 years now. And I've been there long enough that I've gotten to know everybody. And more importantly, I've gotten to know the administration, and they've gotten to know me. And so, for example, I had a meeting with our president last year sometime. And, and when she sees me, the first thing she says is, "Oh, yeah, I keep seeing your name in the newspaper. That's great. We love getting the publicity." I mean, their attitude about me is, okay, we like him, and he gets our name in the paper every now and then. Well, you guys may have noticed marijuana has been legalized in Virginia and other places, and my school is going, well, we got to start doing this stuff. We got to start a business program, and we got to start a medical cannabis program. And we just hired a new provost. The provost is the person in charge of all the academic programs, the sort of the vice president. And I had a meeting with him, and I was presenting some ideas I have about the cannabis studies program. And he already was into hemp. He already had hemp on his whiteboard, on his planning board in the office right behind me. I didn't notice it. And it was sort of funny. I give him this whole presentation, and halfway through the meeting is when he finally explains to me that he goes, well, okay, you talked about how you'd been the weed guy for a while. Well, I was known as the cannabis guy. And of course, my jaw drops. And he explains that he's been a hemp enthusiast for a long time, that he was trying to get some research contracts for hemp at a university he used to work at, and his department chair was so pissed at him about it, didn't speak to him for 2 years. And basically, my university hired a new provost who wants to do things in hemp. And of course, I want to do things in medical cannabis and hemp and some other areas. So we get along just fine. And I'm working on some projects. So we're looking at getting some funding from USDA to promote hemp, and to do more outreach to veterans, and to get veterans involved in the hemp industry. I'm also involved in a special program for my president. I'm organizing a series of events on campus to respond to the Supreme Court's that bleep crazy episode of overturning Roe versus Wade. So my school is letting me organize a series of guest speakers and workshops. I had a meeting with the head of Planned Parenthood in Virginia last week about coming to speak on our campus. So my university is allowing me to do some very high profile projects involving social justice, and also involved in developing cannabis programs. We already have a couple of people in our environmental sciences program who are putting together it's called a certificate. Basically, it's a short course anybody can take on sustainable on organic sustainable agriculture in terms of cultivating hemp. So my school wants to go into these issues that are related to cannabis being legalized, and they're like, well, hey, we got this guy who's been in this issue for his life. He's already on the payroll, so let's put him to work. So they're happy to put me to work, and I'm happy to take advantage of the opportunities and the institutional support they provide me. And this allows me to get into a lot of projects I couldn't possibly do as an independent activist, or I couldn't possibly do as part of an advocacy nonprofit. So I don't have a budget. I don't have a blank check, but I do have communication lines. I have good relationships, and I have the opportunity to bring this institution into cannabis, assuming that all the due diligence of any particular program or proposal pops up. So with the support of my university, I'm now able to go after government grants on things like hemp, and on things like medical cannabis, and on things like this new NIDA position about we need to talk to patients. And I'm like, well, gosh, I know a lot of people who are really good at talking to patients about medical cannabis, and I have a university behind me. Maybe you should give us one of these grants, and we'll go out and take care of that for you. So I'm very, very excited that the time I've spent trying to cultivate a relationship with an institution, that I can use it as a vehicle for the type of work I like to do in this issue. And Shenandoah University, I must say, I'm very impressed with the place. I have been. That's why I've been working there all this time. And again, from the president, from the provost, from my dean, I have full support to help them develop programs in cannabis and to do outreach to the industry, and outreach to patients and farmers and participants. And for me personally, it's a very, very exciting opportunity to take the work I've been doing all this time that we've been talking about. And by the way, your comments and support are very generous and very kind, and it's also very inspiring, and basically it just makes me excited about the kind of things I can do now with the support of my university.
We have a few follow-up questions here. One from Councilmember Michael Green, and then Councilmember Landau. Councilmember Green.
Yeah, John, it's wonderful to hear all this. In my own mind, just the whole evening's conversation is becoming a timeline. I love looking at timelines with little lines drawn and some text next to it as things flow. Would you mind sharing, I think with the group, just some of the names of the courses and the thrust of the curriculum you're developing for the university? I think it's very fascinating. I think it's worth sharing, if you would.
Thank you. Well, the curriculum's a really interesting issue in universities, and how it's produced and all that kind of stuff. And what I am trying to do is I would like to have a public policy program that is focused on social justice, in which I basically train people to be activists. And one of the things about this women's health initiative I'm doing in response to the Supreme Court action is that the school's letting me develop activist training for students who want to get involved in this particular issue. And so this particular project allows me to kind of design and test and sort of work with the idea of a public policy program that basically churns out activists the way that I did with normal. I want to do that institutionally. I want to basically just start sending out activists, people with training to engage with the government and make things happen. So This fall, I'm teaching a course on social justice, and I'm teaching a course that it's called From Marijuana to Cannabis. And so one of my first forays into the cannabis area is basically sort of a history, and it's a sociology course. And it's basically about how we went from the demon weed to the bountiful drug, the bountiful plant with so many positive contributions to society. So we're going to look at that. I'm going to take Richard Bonney's and Charles Whitebread's book. It's around here someplace, The Marijuana Conviction, and also Emily Dufton again wrote this nice book about the 1980s. Those are my texts for this class. But Michael's very interested in this, and I appreciate that, because I've been consulting with Michael about titles for possible courses that I would like to teach. I actually have designed a program that would provide a minor in cannabis studies, and so I'm looking for literature and course material to make this stuff into college courses. So right now in the fall, I'm doing a social justice course, and I'm doing a course on cannabis to marijuana. Excuse me, marijuana to cannabis. Let's keep this going in the right direction. And then in the spring, I'm going to have a course on medical cannabis use, which is going to be my first foray into that area. And then meanwhile, as we work on some grant proposals, and as we kind of work through some administrative processes, we're looking at coming up with more involved programs. My university has a nursing school and a pharmacy school and a business school. And a very nice arts conservatory. And actually, believe it or not, I want to get them in. I want to get everybody into cannabis, and it's really fascinating. Now that it's legal, all of my peers, all of my colleagues are much more open about talking about their own cannabis use and their own interest in all of this. And frankly, around campus, I just get a lot of goodwill, and it's like, right on, let's do it. So it's an exciting time. And as far as the courses go, I'm going to have a ball going in and teaching a course about cannabis. Not a lot of course prep, and a lot of good opportunities.
You got to pinch yourself sometime and wonder if,
Is
considering
it real? It's brilliant.
The decades of resistance that you fought against to now to have this level of acceptance it has to feel strange. Or I kind of always equate it, I'm always waiting for that other foot to drop, you know what I'm saying? But it is wonderful to see what you're doing be celebrated and accepted. And I'm glad to see you also pivot in a way that is, pivotal to the time, which is the change that is happening in women's rights, where I wish, and I'm glad that you are teaching activism, because you are definitely a great one, as one who has been there and done that. Because as you know, there was really no understanding of what we were to do. We had to figure it out on our own, from our mistakes, our foibles, from trying to build unities, etc. It's its own set of challenges. So I can tell by the joy in your expression how much it means to you because of the years of suffering. It's nice to see you being able to relax in and enjoy it.
Well, thank you. I had lunch today with one of my colleagues. She is she's our leader on gender studies, and her name is Petra Schweitzer, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful woman and a great colleague. But I was asking her, I said, okay, so we're going to do the stuff in response to Roe versus Wade. What's the most important thing you want us to accomplish with students? And basically, in her own way, she said, turn them into activists, make them understand that this is their problem. It's all of our problem, but we have to individually own it. But she said, the most important thing to her is that they get engaged, that they get active, they get involved. And I looked at her and said, I can do that because of what we have done here. And so, yeah, it's really nice to be able to extend this work into another issue. But at the same time, we're all fighting the same battle. We're all out for justice. We all have different ways of assessing it and conceptualizing it and seeking it. But we're all in this together. So it's very...
But the same tools also apply. which is great
Yes.
because you're taking those tools that you helped work in the darkest days of the drug war and now are helping women now in the darkest days of their reproductive rights access again.
Because it's just another prohibition, and we have experience fighting prohibition. And I don't like the fact that the Supreme Court went bat bleep crazy, but we understand this and we can engage with it, and so we are.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Landau has a follow-up as well.
Before I get to my question, I first just want to thank you for paving the way. I run one of the normal chapters in California, and I wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for your pioneering. And before I get to my question, just when you're talking about the course, I was just at a cannabis event last week, and there was the dean from City College San Francisco, and I believe it's the first program in the country where they offer a full associate's degree in cannabis studies. It would take me about a week to put you in touch with her, but if you want, I can connect you to, because they are now starting a program with Humboldt State University to make it into a 4-year program. So,
Great. I'd love to learn more about that. Thank you. That would be great.
And my question is, when you were normal, did you guys ever get raided or harassed by the DEA in the 80s and stuff like that? I was wondering if that ever happened.
No, but I do have a good story about that. Okay, so I worked for Normal for a while, and I lead the organization. And actually, I went to American University to study under Arnold Trebek and get my master's degree. So I'm working at AU now. And by the way, Arnold Trebek, rest in peace, another tremendous influence on my life. Someone who was a mentor and a teacher and a good friend, and just a major influence and beneficial force in my life, as well as this issue that we talk about. Anyway, so I'm working at AU, and I'm paying for my studies as a tuition benefit. So I work full time for the university, and I go to school at night. I got my master's degree in justice. So I'm there at work one day, and I get a phone call, and there's a U.S. Marshal upstairs in the main hallway looking for me. And I thought, well, this is going to be fun. So I go up and I meet the U.S. Marshal, and he has a subpoena for me. And I've been subpoenaed to appear before a federal grand jury, and I've been given immunity. And I'm like, oh, well, this is really interesting. What's this all about? Well, what it's all about is I had written a column for High Times magazine. I wrote a lot of columns for High Times, and I said, well, all these people selling drug paraphernalia, they're pretending it's for tobacco, but it's actually for weed. In DC, we say a gaffe is when someone tells the truth. Well, they were doing an investigation of all the local paraphernalia, all the bong makers in the DC area, including, for example, US bongs. You may or may not remember their advertising. Anyway, so what they were doing is they were using the grand jury process as a form of discovery to find out what other people would testify to, in a trial like this. It was sort of an investigative thing. So I was on the outs with Normal at the time. In a long course, you have relationships with organizations, and they're complicated. But hey, we're all on the same side. I call them up, and they're like, okay, we'll get you a lawyer. And they got me an attorney, pro bono, to advise me on this particular thing that was going on. But they got me a really good lawyer, by the way. He later became a federal judge, and he will go unnamed at the moment. Anyway, so I'm given immunity. And one of the things my lawyer explained to me was, okay, if you don't want to answer a question, you got two choices: contempt or perjury. Contempt is better. Don't lie. If you don't want to answer a question, then don't answer it. And the worst that's going to happen is they're going to put you in jail for contempt. And when that happens, you're in jail as long as the grand jury is in session. So if the grand jury is in session for 2 weeks more, then you're in jail for 2 weeks. If they're in session for a year, then you're sitting there for a year. So, okay, I got that straight, So they're actually asking me to explain to them how paraphernalia works. I got to explain to a federal grand jury and a federal prosecutor how to smoke a bong. And they bring in all this paraphernalia in front of me, and they're like, well, did you sell these things? And I'm like, well, I sold those things, but that naked lady bong, that's too tacky. We didn't sell that in my store. So we're going through all that stuff. That was kind of fun. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But then they started asking me about normal and about normal board meetings and to what extent we smoked dope at the meetings. Now, I have immunity. I have no legal base. I cannot take the Fifth Amendment here. So imagine my predicament. What do I do? Well, what you do in a situation like this is you tell the truth. And the truth was, hey, they just fired me a year ago. I'm pissed at these people. Whenever I think about our meetings and this or that, I have the emotional response of our disputes. And I don't remember who did what where. And it wasn't our practice to socialize while we had board meetings. Now, that was okay. I wasn't, that wasn't perjury, that wasn't contempt, and we moved on. But they were interested in whether or not, they could get testimony about normal smoke and dope at meetings or something. So they were sort of paying attention to us. There's an anecdote in my head, and Al, I think maybe it came from you, but there was something about a normal meeting, and then they realized that the DEA was having a meeting next door or something, and that kind of raised some eyebrows or something in a particular hotel. But no, they never really harassed us legally. They never really arrested us. They didn't send in narcs to kind of entrap us into smoking weed. They sort of left it professional. If we got involved in drug trafficking, they would have found us and they would have sent our ass to prison. I mean, that's, that goes without saying, and we didn't do anything like that. So no, there really wasn't a lot of official harassment. That wasn't an everyday thing. But that grand jury thing did remind me that they were, they knew we were around. They were paying attention to us. And I'll add this as well. One day I called the DEA to get some information about the seizures of marijuana crops last year. I got that data every year for the crop reports I did in the 1980s. So I call them up and and they go, oh, Gettman, are you that? John is like, yes, that's me. And so it was like, oh, I just called the DEA and they know who I am. I don't know if I should be proud or concerned, but that's just fun. No, they've never done anything unprofessional in terms of trying to go after us. But they every now and then I discovered that they were in fact paying attention and they knew who we were and where we were and what we were up to. And I'm kind of glad they didn't decide to go after us with the full force of the law and throw us all in jail, because we do live in a democracy. And they also do believe in freedom, despite the fact that we have great conflict with them, and we could argue about that point incessantly. But no, nothing serious, but little suggestion here or there.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net. Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor? If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Rerolled Saturdays. Check it out. Nothing but non-stop cannabis and psychedelic programming. Find it at 420pace.ca.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Michael Green with the next question.
Okay, well, the question that was posited loosely by the Veterans Action Council was basically asking you where you thought cannabis is going to go. We have a plant medicine. There's more. There's a folk medicine going back to China earlier. It's been recognized both as medicine and a plant, especially given what's going on now. Is that going to be like down the line? Am I going to have to worry about being able to get cannabis even though it's legal because of
Michael, you're breaking up a lot, but I have the gist of what you're asking, so let me respond to that. What's the new model for legal cannabis? It doesn't fit into the pharmaceutical model of, created this pill, we spent all this research on it, want to make a profit on it, and here's the pill, go get it from your pharmacy. It doesn't fit because you can get it anywhere. Now, Lester Grinspoon, another one of our great pioneers who we have I have great respect for, I think we all do. Lester said it ought to be like aspirin. It ought to be inexpensive and readily available everywhere. And I do think that's the sanest, most clear assessment of what the medical cannabis system ought to be like in the future. But I see us moving into an area where cannabis is legal, it is widely available, and if people just want to go get cannabis and use it themselves for various symptoms that they're addressing, then they can do that. But I think there also needs to be a medical system where there is science, where there is data about dosage and effects, and what cannabinoids are best for what conditions, what terpenes are best for what conditions, and so on. I do think there needs to be a scientifically driven medical therapeutic cannabis context. I think we need something that's a kind of a synergistic combination, a hybrid of what we now call over-the-counter or alternative medicine and what we now think of as the pharmaceutical thing. I think we have to come up with a new model for cannabis. I don't think we can squeeze it into the model we have for tobacco, or the model we have for alcohol, or the model we have for Valium, or the model we have for Prozac. I think we need to innovate a new model that really.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's a unique thing. Do you think this will hybridize into that model itself?
I think it's for us to make it that way. I mean, it's like this. What do we want? We are the ones who got this right. We are the ones leading our society into this. We are the ones who are now taking our rightful seat at the table in terms of making the decisions about how we do this. And the public policy process is working. It's slow. Frankly, I don't think, all the laws we have now about legal cannabis, in my opinion, they all have to be rewritten, because in my opinion, none of them were made with patients or cannabis users at the table. These things all came out of political processes I love the initiative system. I love the, MPP and others are pouring a lot of money, money from Peter Lewis's estate. He left money reserved for marijuana reform. When he died, he'd been funding MPP and he'd been funding these initiatives. Well, Peter Lewis in his estate, he left money to continue these initiatives, and that's why they're going on now. That's all great, and they're making political compromises to get the job done. But I think that all this stuff has to get redone with patients, with consumers at the table, letting their interests, basically demanding that their interests get met by regulatory policy. I mean, come on. In Virginia, we can grow 4 plants legally. Now, compared to nothing, that's wonderful. And if you're good at this and an indoor thing, you got your mother plant, and you can work with that. But come on, 4 plants is ridiculous. It's totally inadequate, and it's totally unenforceable over time as a policy thing. It's a nice compromise, but it's got to be changed. So yeah, we need a system that consumers and patients are driving that system. They're driving the regulatory policies that create that system. Because you know what? In every market, in every economic market we have, in a free society, in a free market, consumers drive the market. The consumer is not always right, but the consumer is always right when it comes to the decisions they make about spending their money. So yes, I do think we need a brand new system, and I think that it's our responsibility to create it. And I think that society, and again, like NIDA with this change about, well, now we think patient anecdotes are valid and we want to get more information. That's NIDA saying, okay, you guys were right. You gals were right. We're learning from this and we're moving on. So we have been providing leadership in this area for over 50 years. And it's time for us to finish that job. And so really, it's up to us. What do we think cannabis needs to be in terms of a regulatory model? What's the role of cannabis in a society that is based on freedom, governed by the rule of law? So we can do it, and we're going to.
Well, that's what we're trying for. Councilmember Al Byrne, you've got a response.
Dr. John, the new model, sir, I believe should be agriculture. A long time ago, we found out this is a friggin' plant. It's not a drug. You guys keep wanting to insert it in some sort of schedule that has something to do with drugs. I don't think it has anything to do with drugs at all. It's a plant. Yeah, sure, you can make drugs out of it, but you can make drugs out of a willow tree. So I have been pushing the V.A.C. lately, these guys here, to start to consider, just like 30 years ago when we had to create a new semantical definition of the plant, which was cannabis instead of marijuana. I think now we have to create a new model of the cannabis plant and keep drumming into these people that it's a plant. Now, interestingly enough, we've been working a lot with the state of Louisiana, who just transferred cannabis from the agriculture department to the Department of Health. Well, I mean, I'm not going to argue with them, but I think they had it in the right place. So anyway, John, as you go forward in the world, think about Al, think about this, a plant grows in the ground. And every other thing that grows in the ground that I know of, I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor. But every other thing that grows in the ground in Virginia or Florida is regulated by the agriculture people. And I think that's where it belongs.
Very good points. And, okay, look, I used to work for Normal. Organizational relationships are complicated. I don't like to use the word normalize these days. It's just an eccentricity I have. But I think mainstreaming is a great word. And this is what's going on now in our society, is that the cannabis, we're mainstreaming cannabis, and we're going to continue with that. I had lunch with some colleagues today, as I mentioned earlier, and we were talking a little bit about weed. And there was a point where I said, yeah, it's a plant. I mean, it really is really that ought to be the big epiphany that people start with. But for us, we kind of get them there. But the reason prohibition failed is because it's a plant. And listen, I'm a professor, so I get a little pedantic. And so this is something you guys know totally. I'm not trying to, teach you anything, but as I've been saying this for years, it's a plant. You can grow it anywhere, and people do. You can grow it in a closet. You can grow it at the edge of your property. You can grow it in the basement. You can grow it in the attic. You can grow it in the middle of a national forest. The reason why prohibition failed is that you cannot control the production of it because it's a plant and people can grow it anywhere. So in many respects, this idea that it's a plant, from a public policy point, okay, just in the wonkiness of regulations and public policy and so on, I got to tell you, it's really tripped out to see my hands moving around on a green screen. It's a little weird. I'm sorry. It's a little distraction there. You know the culture I come out of. The fact is, because it's a plant, a lot of these regulatory schemes just don't work. So the idea that you can limit people to 4 plants, how are you going to do that? Okay, it's a plant. You couldn't control how many plants they grew before legalization. What makes you think you're going to do it now? The fact that it's a plant explains why all these regulatory structures are houses of cards. I mean, they're sandcastles. That reality, it's a plant. That destroys all of these regulatory schemes because they have no control. It's a guy named Jon Gettman with a K. Really very influential person in criminal justice studies. And Gettman wrote in 1970, at the time they were planning the Controlled Substances Act, he said, this is only going to work when you can control the means of production. If you want to make cyclamate, you got to have a huge factory. Well, government can find that factory and they can shut that down. You can control cyclamates because you can control the means of production. You can't control cannabis. That's why it's legal, because the illegality wouldn't work because it's a plant. So yeah, it ought to be governed as a plant. It ought to be regulated by the agriculture department. And Al is completely right on all that stuff. But Al is even more right. It's a profound revelation that, let's go back to Jack Harrar, okay, and the emperor wears no clothes. Well, the fact that it's a plant is that, oh, look, the emperor has no clothes. The fact that it's a plant is why none of this stuff works. All of these systems about, legalization and X number of plants and all this kind of stuff, if they don't make a system that we will find it useful to buy into, we're just going to grow weed ourselves and go about our business. If they want to make this work, they have to appeal to us, because that's their weakness. That's the Achilles heel. That's the flaw in the diamond. That's the whole point. So Al, yeah, you nailed it. That is, dare I say, the root of the issue. It's a plant, and that's a good thing.
And all puns intended, right?
Yes. Yes, for once, yes.
Yes. Well, after the other 9, then no pun intended. Right. Okay. Moving on to Councilmember Landau with our final written question.
I just want to say the new president of Colombia wants to legalize it, and he says anyone can grow it anywhere as long as it passed testing. He's treating it like a plant. But the question I'm going to ask is, what is your key takeaway with veterans meeting at POD conference, and what's the takeaway that you got from that lunch meeting?
That I ought to be spending a lot more attention. I ought to devote a lot more attention to veterans issues, and that veterans are leaders in our society, and they have a pivotal role moving forward. And I don't say that to be patronizing. That's just an epiphany. It's a revelation. I've been surrounded by veterans throughout my career. I have not served, and I have great respect for those who have. Also, I've talked a lot about working for Shenandoah University. I also work for a college, university in the University of Maryland system called University of Maryland Global Campus. It's basically the online university in the University of Maryland system. Well, UMGC, formerly UMUC, has a contract with the Defense Department. In fact, they just renewed it, and institutionally, we're very happy about that. UMGC has essentially had the prime contract for providing educational benefits to service members and their families. So I've been teaching for UMGC for about 12 years now, longer than I have for Shenandoah. And my classes routinely have active military personnel. I teach a course on organizational strategy. Look, you guys know all this. I respect this in the military culture. I cannot get military personnel to call me by my first name. It's always sir. I feel very self-conscious teaching strategy to a Army colonel, for example. I had an Army colonel in my class, and I'm teaching strategy to him. And I'm like, you're a colonel in the Army. You know as much about strategy as anybody else. I have a different form. But that's made me think differently about veterans and about the military. You guys all know how screwed up military bureaucracies can be. But from working with these students, I've learned about how the military does things well, and about how people who serve in the military have great skills, have great professionalism, have great values, and teaching a course about how you use strategy to create cohesion in an institution. There's an awful lot to be learned from the military. So for me, the meeting Todd and meeting and talking with some of you folks and this luncheon that we had, it just helped crystallize to me the importance of veterans in our society and the opportunities we have to work together on these issues that we have in common, particularly medical cannabis. And also, as an entrepreneur, I see a huge business opportunity here. Veterans need our support, and in terms of running nonprofits, it's an area that we need to spend more attention on. And as a nonprofit, if we devote attention there, our organization will grow because I teach strategy. And to me, nonprofit strategy, it's not about profit, obviously, it's about creating value. And veterans create value, and veterans have problems that if we adjust and help them with that, it'll create value for them and greater value for society. So I'm more focused now on veterans issues because of that particular meeting in Kansas City and the people I've engaged with over my career. It's brought it all together for me.
Etienne, may I follow up very briefly?
Go ahead, Todd.
Hey, thanks very much. Hey, Jon, what an honor it is to have you kind of speak to us tonight. I really do feel like we are among legends. It was an honor to have you out here in Kansas City. The Patients Out of Time event, from my perspective, went really, really well, and was just an example of like how we as veterans, as the community, as we can bring together incredible voices. To have you there for the luncheon with Doc Ballard, the only living Medal of Honor recipient in Missouri, as well as some of the most world-renowned medical cannabis researchers, doctors, and activists. It was one of those moments for me that I don't think I'll forget. So I really appreciate it. I wanted to let you know that, this is happening on a global scale. I was just in Europe this summer and was in Germany at the International Cannabis Business Conference and listened to their Minister of Drugs say the same thing we've all been saying for a very long time, which is, this is a paradigm shift. And, that's it, and it truly is, because of the impact that it can have on so many different levels. While I was there, I will inform you and the team, because I know we spoke about this, you and I, in June when you were here for the Patients Out of Time conference, that my intention was to go to this International Cannabis Business Conference, and also to speak with U.S. Embassy officials and other international officials about cannabis, and I did. This is a paradigm shift. To watch what's happening in Europe in terms of legalization is really epic. And I think our timing and the ability for us to communicate with, soon to be the second NATO ally with legal adult use cannabis, right, and access for their military personnel, it's time to start talking about this at an international, multinational level. our time back there was incredibly insightful, where my family and we have decided to move back to Europe. And Michael, I know we've spoken about this in the past, so we would be moving to Ljubljana, and that is just, a few hours away from Vienna, and where the World Health Organization is headquartered out of. So I'd like to be able to spend a lot more time impacting in Europe. One of the main things that I've been talking to folks at the embassy level about is the potential for cannabis and hemp to serve in post-conflict reconstruction. And a big part of that is education and academia. And you, as a part of academia, we talked about the potential to connect universities. I think that we've got the ability to do that now. We're talking about utilizing hemp and cannabis as an agricultural product, as a medical product, and more, to serve as a baseline for the reconstruction of a post-war area, specifically Ukraine as a backdrop for that, as consideration for that, right? An agricultural country that provides 75% of the world's wheat, and that already grows hemp, by the way, is largely displaced at this point. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have left their homes, right? And are waiting for that peace to arrive so that they can come back. So I think there's a potential through education and academia to educate Ukrainians while displaced, right? Potentially in countries that are huge hemp and cannabis cultivators, like Poland right next door, like France or Germany or the United States or Canada. And so this is a big time international military opportunity, I think, to use this as a backbone. So I guess I don't really have a question. My question was, I was going to ask you what Nate asked you, took away from the Patients Out of Time event. But really, I'm hoping that maybe I can just get a yes or no of, are you considering perhaps coming back to Kansas City at some point to continue all of our conversations? Because I think focusing this conversation on a repeated basis is really what's going to make that happen. And you mentioned in one of your last sentences, the magic ingredient, and that is leadership. And I think that we can provide that if we focus it in certain areas. Veterans that have leadership running through our veins. And so, John, you said you didn't serve either, but I tell you what, you're serving now. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for setting the conditions for the future of what I think is going to be a much better world for veterans and for the rest of the world. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, and I'm humbled by your comments, and I appreciate your generosity and kindness. Yes, I would like to come back to Kansas City. Yes, I'd like organizationally to come back to Kansas City. Personally, you may not know this, but Michael will testify to it. I'm a real barbecue nut, and I just haven't had time to sample all the barbecue in Kansas City yet. So I got to come back for that, if nothing else. Yes, I would like to come back, and I really have I have Leavenworth in my sights now based on our conversation. Let me comment on something you mentioned about Europe that's really, really important, and that's Germany legalizing cannabis. I mentioned Arnold Trebek, and Arnold used to have a institute, a little conference he had for students in London on drug policy. And so one year I flew over there as normal director to speak at that. And one of the other guests was the justice minister from the Netherlands. Now, those of us who understand World War II history appreciate that the Dutch and the Germans still have some issues to grow past from the war. Yeah, but the Dutch minister was explaining the difference between the way the Germans approached the law and the way the Dutch approached the law. He was explaining the Dutch policy of non-prosecution for cannabis. It was against the law, but they had a discretionary policy of not prosecuting people. That's why we held the coffee houses. And here's what he said about Germany. And this is not a snarky remark. It's actually a very astute one. He says, for the Germans, if it's bad, then it must be illegal. This whole thing about the law as a teaching instrument, for the Germans, that's very much part of the way, the role of law in their society. Again, I got to watch the hand thing. That it's just so weird on the green screen. So basically, Germans had cannabis illegal because cannabis was bad. Now, conversely, when Germany says cannabis is legal, they're saying cannabis is now good. Them to go from illegal to legal, it's not a matter of convenience or pragmatism the way the Germans contemplate the law. It's like, no, this is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And so that fundamental shift from them, the way they view law in their society, that is profound. That is a profound change for them. And that is just another reflection of these changes that are going on. And you are very right to bring up the fact that Europe has been growing hemp for decades. I mean, they didn't have prohibition of hemp. They've been growing hemp all this time. We have all the stats, we have all the economic data from that. It's a great resource. So
Sure.
yeah, I want to go back to Kansas City, and yeah, Europe is very important. And the thing with Germany is a great importance that we
And
should,
academia. And by the way, I come back with an open invitation from the University of Ljubljana for academic relationships. They are very eager to start a very professionalized cannabis education program along with exchanges. So if that's something that we could talk about, I'd love to take that offline.
My university
Or
loves
hopefully
to
talk
send
about it in
students
DC.
overseas. We
Okay,
love to send
perfect.
students overseas, so we have a big international focus as well. So yeah, we'll get on that.
Wonderful. Okay, perfect. And we're going to see you in DC, correct?
Who, what, where, when, what?
For
I don't think he's aware of DC, Todd.
No, I'm not.
No, the lobby days coming up in
Yeah.
September. You know, we're not
Oh.
very far away from you.
No, I'll be out in Winchester teaching students to do this later.
Okay.
All right, Councilmember Wade Laughter, he had a follow-up.
Yeah, what made me raise my hand was the comments you made about the Dutch minister's observations about Germany's change in law.
Yeah.
And it brings me back to Al's point about the plant. It really is about the plant. If you can't control the means of production, how can you control production of that? And for me, it really ought to be a right for every person to have this plant as much as they want. And anytime you make rules like you mentioned in Virginia, you can have 4 plants. Well, as an indoor cultivator of many years ago, I can say with authority, it's a complete waste of time to grow 4 plants indoors. Don't bother. Don't bother. At 40, you might be able to make it worth your while and pay for your lights and whatnot. But 4, it's a complete waste of time. And the thing is, people know that. Anybody that's tried it realizes this is a waste of time. Why am I doing this? And so they break the law. And I think that part of the problem of prohibition, part of the fundamental issue around cannabis for me and social justice is it has set up a paradigm where none of us believe what the government says anymore, because this is a patent example of a lie, an obvious, easy to see lie that's still being used to put people in jail. And it's, so anyway, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to call attention to that idea. Again, it's the plant. It really ought to be like growing tomatoes or corn or any other plant that you want to grow because you love it, and or it might be actually good for you. And thank you again, Dr. Gettman. Really a fascinating conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
No, we appreciate you coming in, Councilmember Gettman. We kind of feel you are part of us because you have inspired us and continue to. So do please, in the future, come back and keep us updated as your trials and tribulations through the education system as you make your way through it. Please come back and share your experiences with us so others can learn, so that because others are now looking towards, as their states go toward legalization, or even in the state here of California, the state of California, the University of California system is still pretty afraid and hands off of it again because of the whole federal legality. But as we continue to live in our 10th Amendment realities that we have to exist under, which will need to follow a very interesting change that happened in law in Maine just this past week, it may have a effect on interstate commerce. So I did write to our friend Adam Smith, who we had a previous discussion with, to get some clarification on what this may mean. So we may see some interesting changes just in the coming year already with the elections taking place. But Jon, we can't thank you enough. Do you have any parting words, or do you have anything that you would like to share with us before you go? Tell anybody about your classes specifically at Shenandoah, or whatever you would like to at this time, please.
I would just like to thank all of you for, again, your generous and kind statements. It means a tremendous amount to me personally, to understand that people do appreciate work that I have done. I'm very proud of this work. But I am also just very, very grateful for your support over these decades and in our conversation here. Again, it means an awful lot to me personally, and I find it very inspiring and very fulfilling. So again, I just want to thank all of you for what you have been doing, and emphasize that it helps me do what I do, to know what you all are up to. So thanks for the good vibes. And I mean, really, personally, I just really appreciate it, and I'm proud to have all of you as friends and colleagues, and I'm really proud of the work that you guys are doing, and I'm really excited about our prospects of what we can accomplish together in the near future. So again, I just thank you for all the love and support and the good vibes you're throwing my way. And really, folks, guys, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me personally, and I thank you for it.
Well, you mean a lot to us, and we wanted to share with everybody else on, the people that truly mean, a lot to us. And you are, because you not only have walked the walk, you've talked the talk, and you've done it with an integrity. And the thing about integrity is it's not sexy, it's not fun, it's not what the public looks to and toward. But, neither is the right thing sometimes in society's eyes. So thank you for always being a steward, fostering, doing the right thing, and taking the right approach to do things, because it has led us to continue to foster that as we move things forward. So thank you again, Professor Gettman. Again, I'd like to thank Council members Al Byrne, Wade Laughter, Todd Scatini, Michael Crowitz, Tony Landry, Gage Amsler, Marilyn Mathery, George Armstrong, Nate Landau. Myself, I'm Etienne Fontaine. Thank you very much for joining us for V.A.C. Roundtable number 41. We'll be back in 2 weeks with 42. We will not be back in a month. We will actually be all together in Washington, D.C., lobbying on behalf of veterans for December 14th and 15th. We will be on Capitol Hill talking directly to our peeps. So we will not do our roundtable in a month, so we apologize for that. That's because we're busy, and I will actually be on a flight back from D.C., so I can't make it. So thank you guys very much for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll be talking to you soon. This is V.A.C. Roundtable number 41, Jon Gettman. Peace.
The Veterans Action Council is a Pace Radio Network content provider. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.